Innovations.
And we're talking right now about practical innovations that are bad ones. So you have two kinds of innovations in creed and practical innovations. And you categorize innovations religiously as good or bad. Yani, if we don't look into details. If we look into details, you're going to say obligatory, haram, sunnah, makruh, and indifferent. Innovation falls under any of the five categories, any of the five judgments, al-ahkam al-khamsa. Without going into that meticulous detail, we're going to say innovations are two types, good and bad. So the disliked innovation falls under bad. And these good and bad innovations are innovations in practice and innovation in creed. Now, innovation in creed is always bad. Bad innovation. You cannot innovate a creed. That's off limits. Now, according to Wahhabis, you cannot innovate a practice either, but that's not true. We've been clarifying that. You know the proofs of that. We're going to see some of those more. But there are some bad practical innovations, like making tayammum from a carpet or a pillow that does not have dusty soil. Imagine how ignorant a person is going to be doing that. And that's invalid. And also, the expansion of the mas'a, the lanes of sa'i. Footnote. Sheikh Samir al-Qadhi said in refutation of the expansion of the mas'a, he said, in this time, here, Bismillah, this is a quote. So he said, in this time when tribulations come like waves, a person came forward with a suggestion. Suggestion here means a bad idea. Namely, Abdul Malik ibn Abdullah ibn Duhaysh. His suggestion calls for increasing the width of the mas'a on the eastern side, the sa'i lane, between the lane of as-sa'i and the general street, in a way that the additional area would be one way for going from as-Safa, and the original sa'i area would be the other way for returning from Marwa. So, then the one who makes sa'i would, by that, be outside of the limits. Yani, he would be out of bounds. He would be outside of the limits of the mas'a when going from as-Safa to al-Marwa. So it's going to be invalid. It's like a person making tawaf and on his way back around, coming back to complete his lap, he goes outside of al-Masjid al-Haram. But he thinks he's still making tawaf. Then he comes back in al-Masjid al-Haram. He went out of bounds, not valid. He claimed that this is for the sake of the welfare. And because of the tight space, the tight place, and because of the tight place due to the people's crowding, which is not a good reason. Taking by this suggestion and fulfilling it, which actually occurred, is a calamity, a disaster, and an enormous sin, because it takes the worship out of the reality that our glorious Lord has ordered, and that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered it to be done by. Yani, didn't the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, "Khudhu anni manasikakum"? Take your Hajj rituals from me. Similar to how he said, "Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli." Pray as you have seen me pray. This change of the mas'a spoils and invalidates the sa'i, and refuge is sought with Allah, the Exalted, from that. Changing the mas'a is exactly like changing the area of tawaf. If it were done around other than the Kaaba, it would go out of the reality upon which it has been ordered. Crowding is neither an excuse for changing the rituals or for replacing them. The people might crowd for prayer in such a way that they would be unable to prostrate with the Imam. Yani, the people might crowd in such a way that nobody else can even join the prayer, even. There's no room. So you're just going to wait. Sometimes there's enough people praying, you get stuck somewhere. You didn't even get to make wudu, now you can't even move. You're completely surrounded. There's nowhere. Then you're just going to wait. Crowding is neither an excuse for changing the rituals or for replacing them. The people might crowd for prayer in such a way that they would be unable to prostrate with the Imam. Would that permit them to abandon prostration in the prayer, change its format, and diverge from the Qibla, thus prostrating towards something else? So that's what it would mean for someone to do. So imagine someone who thinks that's a good idea. It says, bro, like, no, what's wrong? We can turn away from the Qibla. We don't have to make sujood. The religion's easy. We don't have any space. And he's going to argue with you. Did any one of the Imams permit that, or did they talk about the case? Did any one of the Imams permit that, or did they talk about the case observing both the religious judgments as well as the welfare of those who pray? This is how the issue of sa'i should be. The issue is like what our Lord, the glorified and exalted, said. فَمَنْ بَدَّلَهُ بَعْدَمَا سَمِعَهُ فَإِنَّمَا إِثْمُهُ عَلَى الَّذِينَ يُبَدِّلُونَهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. Whoever replaced it after he heard it, then the sin is on those who replace it. Certainly, Allah is hearer and knower. And also amongst the bad practical innovations is abbreviating the supplications and salutations upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, such as writing the letter Sad after the name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What is uglier than that is writing Salam, despite that this is disliked. Despite that this is disliked, some scholars have done it, as it appears in some manuscripts. Al-Iraqi said, وَيُكْرَهُ أَنْ يَرْمِزَ لِلصَّلَاةِ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. It is disliked to make a symbol for the salah on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when writing. في الخط بأن يقتصر من ذلك على حرفين, such as to abbreviate it by 2 letters. وَنَحْوِ ذَلِكَ, or the like. كَمَنْ يَكْتُبُ صَلَامٌ يُشِيرُ بِذَلِكَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ وَالتَّسْلِيمِ. This is similar to he who writes salam to signal to the salah and the salam. وَيُكْرَهُ حَذْفُ وَاحِدٍ مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ وَالتَّسْلِيمِ. And now here's just more information for you for your benefit. It is also disliked to omit either the salat or the taslim. It is disliked to omit, to erase either the salat or the taslim, and to settle with mentioning only one of them. وَالِاقْتِصَارُ عَلَى أَحَدِهِمَا. Yes, better not to say sallallahu alayhi and then don't say wasallam, because wasallam is like saying salam. So just to say the salah and not to say the salam, or just to say the salam and not to say the salah, this is disliked. Now I don't know if there's details, because we frequently, even the sheikh would say alayhi salam sometimes without salah. But the scholars have documented, here's one spot and there's other spots we could produce where they documented that it's disliked to make the salat without the salam on the Prophet, or the salam without the salah. كما يفعل الخطيب, as done by Al-Khatib. فإن في خطه الاقتصار على الصلاة فقط. In his handwriting there is settling with only the salah. شاهدته بخطه كذلك في كتاب الموضح. I saw it in his handwriting in his book Al-Mudih. Yani, he saw it in his handwriting because he was dealing with manuscripts. This is hundreds of years ago. They didn't have typewriters or anything like that. So how would you have a copy of a book? It's going to be handwritten. It's going to be a manuscript. And in those days, there was an industry which was transcribing, being a scribe. So probably photocopy machine killed the scribe business. MashaAllah. And so since they were dealing with manuscripts, they would sometimes come to recognize the handwriting of a scholar, even if he lived centuries ago. Because they would have studied his very own manuscript that was preserved, or other books of his, more than one book of his that he wrote with his hands. So he says, I saw that in Al-Khatib's handwriting, in his book Al-Mudih, وَلَيْسَ بِمَرْضُيٍّ, and it is not good, yani it is not appreciated. فَقَدْ قَالَ حَمْزَةُ الْكِنَانِي, Hamza al-Kinani said, كنت أكتب عند ذكر النبي صلى الله عليه ولا أكتب وسلم. Upon mentioning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I used to write sallallahu alaihi and I would not write wasallam. فرأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في المنام. Then I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in my dream. فقال لي ما لك لا تتم الصلاة علي. And he said to me, what is wrong with you for not completing the salat upon me? قال فما كتبت بعد ذلك صلى الله عليه إلا كتبت وسلم. He said, after that, I never wrote sallallahu alayhi without writing wasallam. So that's about the innovation we were talking about, and an extra benefit there that came along in that excerpt. And amongst the practical bad innovations is perverting the name of Allah Ta'ala, like many who are attributed to the tariqas. Yani, they claim to be Sufis. They take the appearance of the Sufis while they are not in reality Sufis. Some start by saying Allah. Yani, they'd say Allah, Allah, Allah. Then they might omit the alif and say Allah, Allah, Allah. Or they might omit the ha and say Allah, Allah, which is the way a lot of Americans say the name of Allah. They say Allah without a ha. And a lot of Arabs, they say Allah without a ha or an alif. They say Allah, Allah. Both of those are haram. But surprising, the Arab would say it worse. He dropped two letters. Among them are those who say, Yani, they make a transition from saying Allah, and then eventually they wind up saying which according to the consensus of the linguists is an expression of pain and complaint. Some of them have exaggerated and claimed that this expression makes the realization and manifestation of matters more likely than the name Allah. Yani, they said, say it is more likely to get your dua and your hopes realized. Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad said, لا تطرح الألف من الاسم. The alif is not thrown away from the name. You must keep it. إنما هو الله عز ذكره على التمام. Merely, He is Allah, whose name is glorified. Yani, completely. His name is Allah with an alif and a ha, ala tamam. Let's say, merely His complete name is Allah. Azza dhikru. His complete name here. Glorified is his mentioning. Is Allah. And let's say instead of is, let's say be here. لا تطرح الألف من الاسم. The alif is not thrown away from the name. إنما هو الله عز ذكره على التمام. Merely his complete name, glorified be his mentioning, is Allah. Some from the group called the Shadhiliyah said that this perversion did not come from the Shaykh of the Tariqah. Yani some Shadhilis, they said, this perversion of God's name is not from the Shaykh of the Tariqah, Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili. May Allah accept his deeds. Rather, this came from the Shadhiliyah of Fez in Morocco. Yani perverters of the Tariqah, of the Shadhili Tariqah. And amongst the practical innovations, which is a bad innovation, is copyright. Punishing a person who copies, yani reserving the right, first of all, to be able to copy something. So this is invalid, has no basis, has no evidence. Among the innovated practices is punishing a person who copies a book authored by someone else without his permission or the permission of the publisher, or the permission of whom they call the right holder. The rights holder or something like that. The one who has rights to the, what they call intellectual property. That's invalid. Yani, intellectual property is invalid. Basically, someone had an idea. The point of the idea is this. How can I sell something and keep it? The answer is you cannot. It is impossible. But because that one's not following the rules of the religion, or whoever came up with the idea, he said, wait, I have an idea. I see a way. See, okay, I'll sell you the actual physical thing, but the idea behind it, I'm going to say, I own the idea. And since I own the idea, then I don't accept for you to copy it. But you can just buy a copy, and you don't have any right to copy this copy. So this is invalid, and that is injustice. And copyright is one term, and they use other terms with similar meanings, such as patent and trademark. They use patent for inventions and trademarks for logos and company names to say you cannot use this or copy this. In their injustice, they say, I paid for this name. This name, I own this name. You cannot own a name. And yani, someone would say, I own Spider-Man or Batman. So nobody owns Spider-Man or Batman. Ideas are not owned. You don't have the right to stop someone from copying something that's his own possession. Now, if it's your book and you own it and you said, I will let you hold my book, it's my book, you can read it, and I do not accept for you to copy it. Don't put it on the copy machine. Don't take it to a scribe. I don't accept. All I accept for you to do with my book is read it and then give it back to me. But what if you just opened up your book and took his own pen and paper, and then he wrote the words of your book in his own notepad? That's not haram. And I gave you an example before to make it clear for you that one of the indications that this is not valid is that it requires a functioning government. So what does that mean? It means, take the example of someone. You are a Muslim, you live in the land. just out in the land, not under any government. Just you're out in the land somewhere. And you come across some people. You have some goods and they have some goods. So you exchange your goods for theirs. They take what you have and you take what they have. Is this valid or does this need government oversight? This is valid. Does not need a government oversight. That's a sale. Or another example. You are that Muslim in the land, not under any government oversight. And then you come across some folks. They are in the land, and amongst them is a lady. And so you married this lady. You did a valid marriage contract. And there's no government oversight. Now, is she your wife or she's not your wife? She's your wife. Don't need a government oversight. Okay, that's clear. Now, take another example. You pass by, you're still in the open land. Yani, but you got some neighbors, not too far. There's a guy, he has a cabin too. Not far from yours. So you go out there and you see your neighbor behind his cabin. So say, hey neighbor, what you doing back here? And you see him making an invention. You say, wow, that's a really cool idea. I can do that. So what if he said to you, no, I invoke the right of you not being able to copy my idea. So is it valid? It's not valid. There's nothing here. So the only way that's going to work is if you had a government who practice injustice and they say, all right, we got a department here. Come and pay us money. We're going to put your name on the book and we're going to say you own this name. And we're going to say nobody can copy your idea. That you own Spider-Man. How much you going to pay us? Yeah, no, this is our fee. You're going to pay us this much money now. We're going to say you own Spider-Man. But only for a while. When it runs out, it's going to go back to public domain. You're not going to own it anymore. Unless you want to pay again. You can pay again and keep the rights to it. So this is invalid. And inshallah, I hope that the Muslims will take advantage of this when the time comes, because they can use that. That's something that actually can be weaponized. So what did the Shaykh say here? Or what do we have here? The Shaykh said, may Allah have mercy on him, among the innovative practices is punishing a person who copies a book authored by someone else without his permission and without the permission of the publisher, by fining him or imprisoning him. They write in the publishing, all rights reserved for the author or publisher. This innovation opposes the book of Allah and the sunnah of his messenger, and no one from the Salaf or Khalaf did it. Rather, it was innovated approximately 200 years ago, following the Europeans. This statement of Shaykh is more than 20 years old now. To say this was innovated 200 years ago, that statement itself is older than 20 years now. So I don't know exactly how long ago Shaykh said that statement. Had this been permissible, then the Salaf would have been in greater need of it, because their authoring books came with greater exhaustion. One of those authors would make his own pen and have to sharpen it. And if it would break, he would have to sharpen it again, to the extent that he would have accumulated abundant shavings. Yani, a lot. And he's going to need a broom and a dustpan in his room or his office. They used to also make their ink with their hands. So that's labor. And that labor there is taking away from authoring. It's taking away from the time of authoring. Despite all of this effort, none of them did this prevention. They did not object to those who used to copy their books and sell them on the market. It's not from the Muslims. After seeing the effort that they put, some of those who practice this innovation in this day of ours erroneously say, to prove their point, yani, to justify their injustice. They say that they have tired their minds by their authoring. They say, this is my intellectual property. So you can't own something just because you say it's yours. It's not going to be yours. You're not going to be owning something just because you merely say it's yours. And ideas are not owned. There's some things that no slave of Allah owns, like najasa. No one owns najasa, no slave of Allah, owns najasa. Like free people, no slave of Allah owns a free person. Or public places, no slave of Allah owns public places. And unclaimed land is not owned by any slave of Allah. And amongst what no slave of Allah owns is a mere idea. So that's a great scam. It is a way to sell something to a person and keep it at the same time. Okay. So, next footnote here. We're trying to finish the footnotes. We read the body already. We got all the way to the end of the section on innovations, but we still wanted to cover the footnotes. So, we want to look at a footnote for this point right here. It says, some scholars have deemed everything that contradicts what the Prophet came with, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, as blasphemy. Everything. What is obvious and what is not obvious but leads to blasphemy. What is obvious? They said that's blasphemy. Yani, obviously contradicts what the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam. And what is not obvious, yani, you need to think about it a little bit more. But it does lead to blasphemy. When you think it all the way through, you're going to wind up at blasphemy. So then it's blasphemy. Abu Mansur al-Baghdadi said, our colleagues, our Sheikh Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, and most of the jurists and theologians from Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah charged with blasphemy every innovator whose innovation is blasphemy or leads to blasphemy. So this means now we're finished talking about practical bad innovations or bad practical innovations. Now we are talking again about heretical convictions, bad creedal innovations. Here's a footnote. So he continues, yani, let's see his quote. And then we'll continue. So he said, our colleagues, our Sheikh Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, and most of the jurists and theologians, jurists means fuqaha, theologians means mutakallimun, from Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, charged with blasphemy. So most, not all. He said most. Now, this is what we took. We took the statement, and we took that there's difference here. And he says this is the position of most, but this position here is not the one we take. So inshallah we'll clarify that. He said the position of most of the jurists and theologians from Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, charged with blasphemy every innovator whose innovation is blasphemy or leads to blasphemy. And he continues, that is like the saying of those who claim that what they worship is an image or has an edge or a limit. So they are kuffar for sure. Or that it is possible for him to move or be still. Yani they worship something that can move or be still. That's blasphemy. Or that what they worship has a soul, according to them, or enters bodies. Or that annihilation is possible for what they worship, or part of what they worship. Like, didn't the Christians, they said Jesus is part of God, but he died? Or if they said that he has parts and pieces. So that's all blasphemy. That's all bid'ah. It also includes the saying of the Mu'tazila in denying the knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jal. Why would the Mu'tazila deny God's knowledge? Because they denied destiny. Well, why does denying destiny, what does that have to do with denying knowledge? Because you can easily confirm the destiny by saying God knew everything in eternity. So therefore, whatever God knew in eternity is going to happen is what's going to happen. Therefore, there's a destiny. Ah, that's very clear, and that's correct. But these people were deviants, and they were innovators, and they were heretics, and they didn't want to say what was correct. They wanted to deny destiny. And so, since they wanted to deny destiny, then they denied what aids them in their denial of destiny, which is they denied God's knowledge. And that's blasphemy. And denying his power and life and hearing and sight. Yani, they denied all of his attributes and denying that he can be seen. Right here. The Mu'tazila, they denied that he can be seen. Right here, Abu Mansur al-Baghdadi, he is saying this is blasphemy. But what we say is not blasphemy for the one who's not being obstinate. It's not blasphemy for the one who's not obstinate. Obstinate means stubborn. Rather, if one's case is that he has a confusion, which is that Yani, he confirms what's correct, that Allah is not a body or a shape or form, that Allah is dissimilar from anything. So that part's right. But his mistake is that from there he thought that therefore he cannot be seen. Meaning it's impossible to see him because he's not like anything. So he has a mistake in his mind because he doesn't know that just because he's not like anything doesn't mean he can't be seen. So he has a mistake. There's something obscure here. This is what we disagree about. When I said we don't take that saying, he said here, most of the jurists and theologians from Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah charged with blasphemy. Every innovator whose innovation is blasphemy or leads to blasphemy. We have this underlined here. This is the part we want to focus on. His innovation is blasphemy, meaning clear blasphemy. Okay, we saw examples of that. He said that Allah has a body or goes into bodies or that he can be destroyed or the likes of that. That's clear blasphemy. But he said the majority charged with blasphemy someone whose creed, whose innovation leads to blasphemy. Means you follow it through until you get to an end and the end is blasphemy, then it's blasphemy. So here, saying, yani denying that Allah can be seen. If you follow it through, then yes, does lead to blasphemy because it means that Allah does not exist, actually. Saying that seeing Allah is absolutely impossible is saying really that he does not exist. But this atheism here of denying his existence is not obvious. Because the one who denies that Allah can be seen actually does not deny his existence. Yani, it is the result of his position, but he didn't think it all the way through, and we really, in reality, cannot hold it against him with the meaning that we cannot confirm that he is denying God's existence in reality. Inwardly, he's not denying God's existence. But he has a blunder. So we say this is not kufr for the one who is not stubborn. Rather, we're going to teach him. And Abu Mansur is saying here, the majority are deeming anything that leads to kufr as kufr, even if it's not obvious. So this is a case where some scholars deemed it as kufr, denying that Allah is seeable. And others, they said, it's not kufr without obstinance. And their confirmation of many creators other than Allah Azza wa Jal, that's blasphemy. But they're going to claim that they don't create like Allah creates. They're going to say something like a Wahhabi. What would a Wahhabi say? Even though they're on total opposite spectrum in terms of conviction. Mu'tazila is closer to an atheist. Wahhabi is closer to a Christian. But they're going to be saying the same thing here, which is that, but yani, just each one saying it from his own perspective. The Wahhabi is going to say, no, I'm not saying Allah is like his creations. If he has two hands, he has two hands not like the creations. And he can hold things in his hands not like the creations. And he can stick his foot into the hellfire not like the creations. And sit down on the throne not like the creations. And come down to the lowest sky during the last third of the night not like the creations. So that's in his mind. This makes sense. Mu'tazili is doing the same thing, because we're going to say to him, you are saying you can create, that's shirk. He's going to say, no, I'm not saying I can create like Allah can create, because Allah creates without effort and Allah creates without tools. But I create with effort and I create with tools. Here's a question for you. What's your answer for this one here? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're going to say to him, but you still believe that you bring something from non-existence into existence. So it's kufr. And as for the Wahhabi, when he says, he puts his foot in hell, not like the creations. You're going to say to him, you are likening him to the creations because you insist that it must be taken by its apparent meaning. You say that giving alternative interpretation is invalid for these cases. They must be taken literally. So then it must be an organ because you're saying it's literal. We will not let you hold the position on one hand that is literal and on the other hand that it's not an organ. We will not allow you to get away with this contradiction. This is because denying his knowledge and power necessitates the impossibility of him being knowledgeable and powerful. And the impossibility of seeing him necessitates the invalidity of his existence. And saying that his speech is eventual necessitates that his speech is the same type as the speech of people. And that people would be able to challenge the Quran with something similar. And that invalidates the miracle of the Quran. Yani all these things he's saying. When somebody does like this, it means this. So that's the point he's trying to show you. When someone believes something that leads to kufr, the result of it is a kufr, we're going to say it's kufr according to him. He's saying all of it is kufr. But we are saying, yani the part that I want to just ask so I can hear is that really is the majority position? We took this majority, the statement that I read to you is what we read, what we learned, it's what we document. But what we learned from the Shaykh is that more accurate way is there's an area of subtlety where we're not going to deem a person as a kafir. An area of subtlety that these, according to what this author said, the majority don't regard this subtlety here. This subtlety, we are the ones people call us the takfiris. This subtlety of not deeming a person a kafir without him being stubborn. It's not the way of a takfiri. If you're going to be a takfiri, it means it's going to be a kafir. So what did he say here? Yani, to point out the results that he's talking about here. Because denying his knowledge and power necessitates the impossibility of him being knowledgeable and powerful. Meaning, as you know, the Mu'tazila used to say Allah is knowledgeable and powerful, but they used to deny that he has knowledge and power. So we're going to say that's still blasphemy, because when you deny that he has knowledge and power, you are, by extension, denying that he's knowledgeable and powerful. And the impossibility of seeing him, that's what they say, seeing him is impossible. What does that lead to? Necessitates the invalidity of his existence. Means you're saying God doesn't exist. But what did I tell you? What the one who's denying, who believes that seeing God is impossible, does he really deny God's existence though? That's the thing. So if he's not being stubborn and he's not being tricky, And then he's confused, and we're not going to deem him as a kafir. But if he's a standard Mu'tazili, then he's going to be a kafir here, because really he's stubborn and he's tricky, and he's using word games, and he wants to deny God's existence and see if he can fool you about it. See if he can get out of the conversation with you without you realizing that he denied God's existence. And saying that his speech is eventual, because they said Allah doesn't have uncreated speech. The Quran is created. That's what they say. So they don't believe he has an eternal speech. Saying that his speech is eventual, meaning created, it necessitates that his speech is the same type as the speech of people. And that, then if you say that, then that would mean that the people could be able to challenge the Quran with something similar. And if you say that, then that would invalidate the miracle of the Quran. And if you invalidate the miracle of the Quran, then you're going to discredit Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as being a truthful prophet. So then that definitely leads to blasphemy. So it is blasphemy. But for us, this one is blasphemy here. It's not what it leads to that made it blasphemy. It is blasphemy. It's enough to believe that God's speech is created to be blasphemy. We don't have to think about what it leads to be sure that it's blasphemy. And whoever confirms a creator for the good and evil other than Allah Azza wa Jal, he is the Qadari that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam informed about. Those that they are the Majus of this nation. He prohibited the validity of one's marriage, and he prohibited the validity of his marriage and the validity of the prayer over his dead body. Yani, this Qadari who is a kafir, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam deemed his marriage invalid, and praying over him is not valid if he died as kafir. This is because the saying of the Qadari resembles the saying of the Majus, Persian fire worshippers. And in fact, it is more blasphemous because the Majus only said that there are two creators. One for the good, who's a light, and the other for evil, who's darkness. Mu'tazila, on the other hand, said there are many creators, and that the slaves are powerful over what Allah does not have power. The Mu'tazila said, there's many creators, and these slaves, they have power over what God does not have power. They say Allah only created our bodies, and He created in us the power to create. So we create our own deeds. Allah doesn't create our own deeds. Our deeds are not under His power, and therefore we are accountable for the deeds we create. That's their conviction. Instead of saying the deeds they acquire. And so the Mu'tazila said that there are many creators and that the slaves are powerful over what Allah does not have power, and that Allah wills the existence of something and it does not take place. According to the Mu'tazila, Allah would will something that doesn't happen. This is blasphemy, very clear blasphemy. And we don't have to regard what it leads to here. It is clearly on its own, without requiring a second step, blasphemy. And they believe that Allah does not accept the existence of something, but it comes into existence anyway. But accept here means that He doesn't create something. They believe that Allah would not create something. He did not will for something, but it will happen anyway. This is the description of the conquered and the weak. That He doesn't want something to happen, but it happens anyway. That's the description of who is conquered and weak. وَسُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ وَبِحَمْدِهِ